Okay, so my educational thinker is Thomas Hopkins Gallaudet, and he is known as the father of American Sign Language for reasons that will become clear later. Just a little bit of background information. He was born in Pennsylvania in 1787, but most of his life was spent in Hartford, Connecticut, which is where the majority of our story takes place. Okay, so his educational background is, I believe he was a philosophy major at Yale. He got his bachelor and master's degree. Now, I have to say, I've only heard he was a philosophy major. I know he studied philosophy and had an interest in it. I'm not sure if that was his actual field, though. He then went on to study theology at Andover and became a minister, so this philosophical viewpoint turned into a theological viewpoint as well. And it kind of shifted his interest to ministering among neighborhood and community of the less fortunate. And he had a neighbor in particular, a girl named Alice Cogswell, who was deaf. And he found that she was extremely capable and able to be educated, but no one necessarily had the right tools to help her. So that's kind of where his passion for what he would do came into play. So he was influenced by the French system of teaching the deaf and mute, and he had read works by Abbé de l'Épée, who was a man of the faith, who was called the father of the deaf among the French, and he founded the kind of creme de la creme, I guess you could say, French Institution of the Deaf, and he was renowned for instituting a method of teaching the deaf and the mute through a visual and tactile language rather than just oralism or lip reading, which is what was taught primarily in the United States at this time. So Thomas Gallaudet actually traveled to France to see this school, and he met Jean Massot and Laurent Clerc. Now, these men were both students of Abbé de l'Épée and were both teachers now at this French school for the deaf and the mute. And Laurent Clerc actually went on to be one of Gallaudet's closest friends and colleagues. And Gallaudet taught him English, and Clerc taught him sign language, French Sign Language, and together they decided to come back to the United States, where they would found the first American school for the deaf and blind, and mute, sorry. Okay, so his impact on the world. Thomas Gallaudet became the first major deaf advocate. He developed the American School for the Deaf and Mute and was able to help educate these people and these children from all across the country who would, before this, never have the chance to learn sign language and would be, forced to learn lip reading, which was, we were finding through Gallaudet, this was not the most effective way for these guys, these students to learn. And he actually helped develop American Sign Language. So he had learned French Sign Language and was able to adapt it into American Sign Language. And so that's why he is known as the father of American Sign Language. And his son, Edward Minor Gallaudet, brought a charter to the attention of President Abraham Lincoln to establish the first deaf university. And so the American School for the Deaf that Thomas Gallaudet had founded was for elementary through high school, secondary education. And so his son decided to further his father's dream and institute a national university for the deaf for college students. So it was signed and petitioned for and approved by Abraham Lincoln. So that's another figure who was impacted by Gallaudet's work, and Abraham Lincoln came to be known as a deaf advocate as well. And the influence continues because not only did the students who attended Thomas Gallaudet School and then his son's university, they were learning as deaf students, but a lot of them turned into teachers of deaf students. And so they were kind of brought up through this system and were able to, in turn, kind of pay it forward and teach other deaf students the way that they had been taught. So it's pretty powerful, and the school is still standing today. Gallaudet University is in Washington, D.C., and it's the largest population of primarily deaf students. So it's kind of interesting to see his work continuing. So kind of as a critique of Thomas Gallaudet, he was very influential and forward-thinking, especially in this time. No one else was really considered a pioneer of a specific community of what at the time was considered a disability, and he actually was able to prove otherwise. He was an advocate, and he became kind of the hero and champion of deaf culture, modern deaf culture here in the United States. And so I'm just going to finish up with a quote which kind of ties in his philosophical standpoint, his philanthropic view, and of course his theological background in this quote that he gave in a sermon as they were dedicating his school in Connecticut. He said, "Let us be grateful to God for the very superior advantages which we enjoy. Consider how imperfectly we improve them, but be mindful that after all we do, we are but unprofitable servants, and thus, feeling the necessity of our continual reliance upon Christ, trust alone to his righteousness for acceptance with God." And so that is Thomas Gallaudet. Thank you so much for watching and listening.